Good evening, and thank you all for joining us for another Friday with Friends. See, I have a nice friend with me right here that just popped up on our screen. Most of you know, or some of you know, that we have Sister Karen Peyton with us tonight, and you all should be familiar with she and Brother Peyton. They've been friends, if you will, of Newark for years, and have had much contact with us. And so tonight we're going to get to hear Brother Peyton's better half's story. I know he's listening. I'm just throwing shade, Brother Peyton. You know we love you both. But anyway, thank you all for joining us. If it's your first time with us, we welcome you. If you would like information about us, be sure to go to newarkupc.info. There you can find out all kind of information about us. You can even, especially if you're new, go to the I'm New card. This I'm New card, you can leave us your information. From that, we can add you to our list to receive reminders of different things that are going on within the church, different services and things like that. Also, there's a media card that contains tons of past services and messages that you can avail yourself of at your own leisure. And also there's information about small groups and our children and youth classes. There's all kind of stuff there about us. So just remember newarkupc.info. All right, well, I'm going to shift from those house cleaning items, I called it, and I am going to get to our interview with Sister Karen Peyton tonight. Welcome, Sister Peyton.
Thank you.
I'm actually looking forward to this story. I've had many conversations, maybe at least it feels like, with she and Brother Peyton, along with Steve and others. And I probably should know some of this stuff, but as most of you guys know, I have a terrible memory. So part of her story will be unfolding even for me tonight. And so, Sister Peyton, if you want to take just a second and greet the viewers, you can go right ahead. But we're going to start. This church loves stories. They love to hear people's testimonies and where people came from and how they came to the Lord, that kind of thing. So we're going to start there tonight. We're going to start at the ground and work up. But anyway, we're going to take a second and greet the congregation. The congregation, you can.
Hey, hello, everyone. Good to be with you all again, even though it's at a distance. Kind of excited about tonight, but kind of nervous too. So bear with me, and I'll do my best to do it and say what God wants me to say and share with you all. So.
Hey, that's all right. Hey, again, it's just like we're having a conversation and everybody else gets to listen in.
Yeah, but you don't know who's listening.
See, I got my cup of tea, and I'm just saying I'm going to settle down for evening with Sister Karen Peyton. I know, better. It's easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this web can be kind of scary, right? You have no idea, how
right.
Right. I feel you. So tell us, tell us where you were born, where you were raised, and just tell us a little bit about the early part of your story.
Oh, the early part. You think I can remember that back that far?
Uh-huh.
I'm a maniac. I was born in Maine, Old Town, Maine.
Amazing.
And, yeah. And I basically my whole life has been about church because my dad was a minister. And I'm fourth, my great grandfather, he wasn't a minister, but he helped start a church there in Old Town, Pea Cove area. And then my grandfather was a licensed UPC minister. My dad was a licensed UPC minister. And then I came along.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
I'm a PK, a preacher's kid, and kind of grew up. Everything was about church. I mean, I was the ones that, slept on the pews or under the pews or whatever
Yes.
when I was a kid. And, my sister and I, when I was young, we had to get up in front of everybody and sing a duet. And, so I was introduced early into, being in front of people and doing stuff. And I was just a young teenager. I had my own Sunday school class. So, I was introduced to ministry at a very early age, ministry in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I used to travel with my dad sometimes. He was a presbyter at times in the district of Maine. And at times he would have to fill in interim, like for churches, if their pastor was out of town or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I would travel with him, and that was kind of cool, and helped out whatever needed helping out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just what I've known all my life, actually.
Right. So you mentioned your sister. You just have one sibling?
Yeah, I have one sister, two brothers.
Two brothers. Okay.
Actually, I had three. The first one died before I ever met him. He was just young. But then my other brother is deceased. I have a brother and a sister that's still living in Maine.
Oh,
So
okay. All
yeah,
right. All right. So, oh, you mentioned something pretty interesting to me that you were introduced to ministry pretty early. And
yeah.
so, was that a thing that was encouraged? I'm kind of leading you here, right? In other words, was that just
Well,
given that?
it wasn't encouraged or discouraged. It's just what it was, you know. When I look back at it, it's like it's just what we did, you know,
It
as
was
a
it was
family.
normal. Mhm,
Yeah. And
mhm.
I remember, you know, growing up, I always saw myself as an adult. At the time, I didn't know, of course, as a kid, you don't know what your adulthood is going to look like. But I assumed that when I grew up, I'd either be a minister's wife or a missionary's wife or an evangelist's wife, but it was always in the wife, you know, as a
Ah,
wife. I really didn't see myself doing, you know, ministry on my own as far as once I left home. But God had other plans, obviously.
ah, that's the part of the story I'm interested to learn about
Okay.
tonight. Okay, so you grew up in Maine, and then so you mentioned leaving home. When was that? And what was that to do initially?
Okay, I left home when I was 21,
Okay.
and my I had a really close friend who had just graduated from Bible school in Canada. It's NCC now. It was Marysville Bible School back then, but she convinced me that we needed to go together, move to another city about 100 and I don't know how far it was from us, but it seemed like a long ways at the time.
Still in
uh,
Maine?
yeah, it's still in Maine.
Maine, okay.
It was a home missions church that was starting, and we were going to go as tent makers, as they called them then.
Ah,
They called them tent makers, and they were people that went to help out whoever, whatever the minister was there, just to help them get a church started.
mhm.
So it's like, okay, well, I'll think about it. I'll pray about it. Well, I decided, yes, you know, this is the next step. You know, this is probably what I should do.
Mhm.
So we did. We went. We moved, and it was like the church was like the pastor, his family, and us. That was it. It was like 7 people. That was church. But
It was
I
really getting started, right?
yeah, I
Mhm.
actually ended up staying there 17 and a half years, but saw the church grow from like nothing to
Really?
I think by the time I left, it was running. I'm terrible with numbers, but I think it was running or averaging around 150, and so you know, and it was like it was really great though because um, I didn't. It wasn't a place where I did much pulpit ministry, but
Mhm,
I
mhm.
mean, every other type of ministry you can imagine had to be done by someone, right? So,
Yes. Okay,
so it
so
was
what
like,
did you do? Okay, it wasn't pulpit ministry. That was 17 years. So I'd imagine you did quite a few
yeah.
things. So tell us
Well,
some of the things you did.
it's kind of funny because when you're talking about pulpit ministry, I actually did more pulpit ministry up to that point when I was a teenager than I did once I moved here. when I was when I was a teenager, I'm just gonna jump back in time just a little bit. Um, about a mile from where we lived, there was a the church that my great grandfather had helped to start.
Mhm.
It was like a mile from home, and so we knew all the people there. You know, all the young people were my friends. So I started going. I went there a lot, even as a kid, for vacation Bible schools and youth services. And so what they did in their youth services, young people would take turns being the speaker for the youth
Oh
services.
yeah.
So I I I loved that time because I can remember going through my dad's. He had a set of those Erdman's pulpit commentary sets, and I would go through those, and I would find sermons, and I would preach them,
Oh,
and
that's
I had a
funny.
great time. But you know, it was early days, but I had fun doing it. But then it's really interesting because it seems like every phase that I went through in ministry, and it seems like my life is divided up into places I've been and phases of ministry
Mhm,
rather than just one big whole picture.
mhm,
Uh, so when I went there, like I say, it wasn't much pulpit ministry at all, but I did everything from teaching Sunday school. We had outreach that we had to do every weekend. Um,
oh,
yeah, yeah, that was not fun, but you
door
know,
knocking.
door knocking, yes.
Uh,
And you had these little, all the tent makers, they have these, I don't know if they all did, but at this church we did, we had these forms we had to fill out every week to make sure we checked all the boxes. How many tracks did we pass out?
Yeah,
How many doors
quota.
did we know? It's like, okay.
Oh, wow.
But and then of course, when you're teaching Sunday school, you have to do visitation and check it up on your kids. And
Mhm.
and I can remember that was an experience in itself because um this was, some of the kids, they came from areas that you go to visit them, and you
Mhm.
end up stepping over their drunk father that's passed out on the floor,
Wow.
to talk with their mom. And it opened my eyes to a lot, because I had never up to that point had to deal, with that type of thing. And so it was.
So you guys actually went to people's homes and
Yes,
checked
we
on them.
went to people's homes. Well, actually, probably at first we would send a postcard or something, then we'd make a telephone call, but if
Mhm.
they still didn't show up, we were knocking on the door and visiting, see where they were and why they hadn't been in Sunday school.
How did that
Or
go? How were you received? I'm just kidding.
actually not actually pretty good, because
Okay.
yeah, I mean, they had their issues and their problems of why their kids weren't in Sunday school, but the people liked us, we're pretty likable. Come on.
Well, you're pretty sweet, yes. I'm sure you
But
were scared when you were younger too.
and actually, the first time I had horse meat was one of my Sunday school kids' mother. She invited us to dinner, and she fed us spaghetti, and it was made. The meatballs were made out of horse meat, so that was interesting.
Oh, was that a common thing in Maine, or was that?
No, that was my
Hmm.
first time to try it. But anyway,
Did you know it before you ate it?
no,
You
I
didn't?
had an idea because she had mentioned something about it before, if we'd ever had it.
Uh-huh.
So I was kind of suspicious. And when I asked, she confirmed that yes, it was.
Did it taste like chicken?
No,
I'm just
it didn't taste bad though. It was meat.
kidding.
But
Okay.
and we did bus ministry, helped out with that. Uh you name it. Was in a building program,
Mhm,
what all
mhm.
that involved. I played the piano, I sang, I was a treasurer for the church. Just everything,
Was there any?
at some point, maybe not all at once, but at some point you kind of did a little bit of everything.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. So
So,
so you obviously felt free to do those things, and obviously in the case
oh
where
yeah,
the labors are few, that then
right,
was there
right.
anything that you can recall that you were prohibited from doing
Well, other than the pulpit ministry.
other than that?
But I a lot of people, probably a lot of women especially, I think they feel like, if they've been held back in some ways, they resent it, or
Mhm,
allow bitterness to creep in or whatever. But I never did, because especially back then, that's kind of just the way it was.
mhm.
Women were not really in the pulpit much.
Right, right.
I remember growing up, there were a couple women ministers in the district, but they were like preachers' wives. They weren't really on
Mhm,
their own,
mhm.
even though they did hold the license. And
Okay.
they were accepted.
Mhm.
They weren't really, you know, put up or promoted or
Sure.
encouraged. I think they were even just tolerated by some. But but actually, overall, Maine is a good district for women. It really
Uh,
is.
oh,
And
okay.
now we have several women ministers in the district in Maine. And they're all great women. They've stepped out on faith. They've done things, and allowed to do things that a lot of
Mhm.
women wouldn't be able to do in other districts. So I'm proud of them.
That's
But
shout out
back
to
then,
Maine. Right?
but back then, I was just kept so busy doing everything else. I really didn't even feel like it was
Mhm.
something I really wanted to do, or felt
Yeah,
the need to do.
sure.
So
You had a lot going on that kept
yeah,
you active in it. Mhm.
and that's one thing I found about ministry. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. If you're doing what God's wants you to do, whatever is at your hand to do,
Mhm.
if you just do that, I mean, God, He makes a way. Whenever He wants you in a place, He'll make sure you're there.
Yes,
Um,
he will. I agree with that.
and that's kind of what my life has been. It's just going from one open door to another. It's like I'm
Wow.
not trying to knock down doors or push my way into
Yeah.
any positions or anything. It's like will you do this? Sure, okay,
Yeah.
and
Just keep following his lead.
yeah, and if you do that, I mean, God opens up doors. He makes a way to
Sure.
even, things that you might not have even dreamed that you
Hmm.
would want to do or end up doing. It's like, before you know it, there you are doing it.
Aha.
So
Okay.
yeah,
So you spent 17 years.
17 and a half
in this.
years, yes.
So how did you get from there to Alaska?
Okay.
Huh.
Well, that's kind of interesting too, because I had, ever since I was a kid, I was always interested in Native Americans.
Mm,
I used to love to read novels or historical books about, the American Indians.
mhm.
Then I got into reading about the Eskimos in Alaska, and I really loved that. I thought that was so cool. And the more I read about them, the more I thought, you know what, I would really like to work with the Eskimos. I really would. But you know, when you're young, you think, well, that's just a
Uh-huh.
fantasy, that's just
Mhm.
something that, it's adventurous, it's exciting, but is it really God's call? You really don't know.
Right.
When you're working through all that, you
Mhm,
really don't know.
mhm.
But there would be times I felt, well, yeah, it is. So I would put out feelers here and there, just kind of putting out a feeler to see, is this really God's will or is this me?
Now hold
And
on a second, because I was having a conversation with somebody else the other day about I call it pushing doors, and you call it putting out feelers. In
yes.
what ways did you put out feelers? What just give us a couple
Well,
of ways.
one thing I did is I wrote a letter to the home missions director there in the District of Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
and at that time, nothing seemed to really materialize. Of course, I prayed about it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and I don't remember in specific um, other things that I did. I know there was. There might have been one or two other ways. Mostly it's just praying about it, and if there was a chance to
Sure.
contact or talk to somebody about it, maybe that would be
Sure.
more like it. Um, and I would talk to my friends, and I would say, you know what? Because Alaska, I mean, that's a long way from the state of Maine. And I was young and single, so it's like I'd say to my friends, hey. How would you like to go to Alaska with me to be a missionary to the
Try
Eskimos?
to
They
enlist
say,
a crew.
seriously, you get a call to Hawaii, let us know.
Right? Who wants to go to
Right.
Alaska?
Yeah. So, but like I say, so it was like, there would be like ebb and flow, come and go.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, um, it just kept reoccurring so many times. It would come to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, I need to find out for sure. Is this me or is it God?
Sure.
Um, so I contacted through my pastor, who was the district superintendent, contacted the district superintendent in Alaska, and he said he had a young lady there in his church that was interested, and to go work with the Eskimos. So um, the district superintendent of Alaska sent back two options. Excuse me.
Okay.
Um, one was in Bethel, and the other was in King Salmon. What I didn't know at the time was only the one in Bethel was to the Eskimos. The one in King Salmon was to an Indian group.
Okay.
They were natives, but they were Indian, not Eskimo.
Okay.
Excuse me, I got
Wait,
to tickle my
wait.
throat.
That's okay. Oh, I hate when that happens. All right.
I
Hey,
know.
quick question, not to deviate too far, but just so we know that, because I'm ignorant about origin. So Eskimo and Indians, the difference. I mean, in other words.
Oh, absolutely, yes. The Eskimos, they are more of a Asian descent. They
Mm,
crossed over the northern part of Alaska when there was a land bridge was there,
mm-hmm.
and so they came over from there. Whereas the Indians are more from um,
Okay.
the lower part. So they're definitely two distinct,
People's different. Okay.
peoples. Yes,
Okay.
people groups.
All right.
So, and I prayed about it. I thought, well, Bethel, that means house of God. I guess I'll pick Bethel. And
I was thinking that exactly.
and hey, it was the Eskimo one. I picked right. Um,
Okay.
so I said, because I decided I had 3 weeks vacation coming to me, paid vacation from my work. And I thought, I'm going to settle this once and for all. I'll go up
Mhm.
there for a vacation. And if it's God, he'll let me know. If it's not, I'll have a good time, I'll have a vacation up there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, long story short, I went up, and while I was there, we was flown into a small Eskimo village, and we had church in this little like shack. I mean, it was just, what we would consider a shed or something, not really a home or a church building for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there was precious people, the Eskimo people. I just fell in love with them immediately, and I just felt so at home and so like this is where I belong, because like for the 2.5 years prior to my going to Alaska, I just, how when God's ready to move you someplace else, you just feel restless. You don't feel really like you belong where you are at. And I just felt like
I don't know that about a physical location, but I know that about a different level, so to speak.
Right. Where God is kind of stirring up the nest and getting ready to kick you out. And so I had felt that. I had felt that restlessness, and I looked around. It's like, God, there's a lot of people in this church here. They don't need me here anymore. And my heart was always for missions, it'd be at home missions or whatever kind of missions. I had a heart for missions. And so it was like, so when I went there, I had that peace in my heart. It's like, this is where you belong. This is where God wants you. So, I mean, all doubt was removed. I didn't have any questions anymore that is the plan that God had for me. However, I didn't know how it was going to work, because when I went back to Maine, it was like, okay, God, I feel the confirmation, this is where you want me. But I had a list of like 5 or 6 things that, would have to take place before I would feel the liberty or the freedom to be able to go. There were positions that I held at the church that would need to be filled. I had a vehicle that I wanted to sell. There was different things that I felt like I needed to have done to be released. And I had the list, and I told God about the list, and
here's my list.
And because, one by one, they just was taken care of, until the very last one was the money. Money is always the issue, right?
Yes.
Because, it was expensive, even more expensive back then to be flying that far. We're talking thousands of dollars. And so out of the blue, the missions director for the Yukon, Alaska district called me. And he says, I hear you're interested in coming as an assistant missionary to help out in Bethel. I said, yes, that's true. He says, are you really serious about this? You really do it? I said, yeah, I really am serious about it. He said, well, if you are, he said, we will pay your way here. He said, we will come. We'll send you the money, the tickets, whatever. We'll make sure that you get here. We'll pay your way. Wow. And it's like, okay, God, there goes my last.
Can't get any louder than that.
On the list. It's now or never, right? I gotta follow through. And everybody's telling me, oh man, that's so far away, and here I was. I mean, single.
Yeah.
And it's
wait. About how old were you at that time?
I was 38.
38. Okay. All right.
30. Actually, 37 when I first went over, and then 38 when I went back. I'm pretty sure. I kind of lose track of the years, but
I just want to get a time frame.
Yeah. So I went back over, and like I say, single, but I had reached the point where it's like, God, I had all these dreams when I was young about being a pastor's wife, missionary's wife, evangelist's wife, whatever, but I don't need to be married to work for you. You have a work for me to do, even as a single. I can do it, I don't need to be married. So and I did a lot of work too. We had a large singles group at the church where I had been working.
Okay.
And so, we encouraged one another. And, I felt like, it was a good example to them as well, to step out and do something as a single, because you don't, all the singles out there, you don't have to be married to do God's work.
Tell them. I was about to say that. So often we're waiting on something in order to. Yeah.
Right. You don't need to wait. God can use you in whatever whatever you're single, married, or whatever. God
Absolutely.
can use you if you're a willing vessel. That's all you need to be. Say, God, here I am, use me, however you see fit.
Hmm.
And that's what he's looking for. He looks for people that are willing and that's saying, God, whatever.
Yeah,
And don't try to lay down all the rules and regulations for God.
that's right, right. For your ultimatums. Yeah, because
Right, right,
obviously what God has for you, as we say, He has for you, and even on the way
right,
and doing whatever you're doing, He can bring those people or whatever it is that you may be hung up on. He can still bring
right,
those things to you. Sure.
right. And all those things that I thought I would be, I
Hmm.
ended up being able to do most of them before I was married, and the rest of them after I was married. So it's like, okay, God, you got this. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I did. I went up there, and um, it was really fun. I loved it. We had church like all the time,
Oh my goodness.
all the
All the
time,
time.
all the time. There was always people there. They were so hungry, and
Wow.
it was working with them, teaching Bible studies, having church. And they had no regular set time for church. If you got together, you were having church. And it could go all night, and especially
Wow.
when in the summer it's light all the time, the winter it's dark all the time. You really don't pay attention to whether it's light or
Just lose
dark or
track
the
of time.
time, right? You just do what
Oh,
you do
wow.
whenever.
So
But
you mentioned that when you went over the first time, there was what service in some little hut type of deal. All right. So
right.
were there like large centralized spaces where you guys would gather, or was it more in homes, or
Oh
how?
well, the major in Bethel was it was like the hub for all the villages. It was more
Okay.
of a city, so we did have a regular building. It wasn't like a fancy church building.
Mhm, mhm.
Actually, the first building that they had was like a trailer that had been used as a pool hole in a trailer park.
Oh,
And once you had services there, it was packed out and people running around the outside when the having a glory victory march, running around and hooping and hollering. And the neighbors weren't liking it, so they were wanting us out of there.
I
and
just had
God
a visual of that. It's true.
and God provided a building, a regular building of our own by itself, um, and that
Wow.
was really nice. But let me think. I don't want to get too far ahead of
That's
myself.
okay. I'm going to tell Erica to put out because I want to segue with the story. So Erica,
Okay.
you can request questions at this point. But you mentioned that you had at some point ideas of being married and being a missionary's wife or a pastor's wife and that kind of deal.
Yeah.
So here
Well,
you are.
Well, yeah, and at that point, I was decided I'm never going to get married, right?
Oh, you had just resigned to say no,
I
that's
Yeah,
that.
I decided, hey, I can do this as a single. I don't need to be married. So I was doing
Oh,
really great as a single, and then it just as the situation that was going on at the time, like I said, we was having church all the time and everything.
mhm,
Um, but my husband was going through a rough time. With his family life
mhm,
and
mhm.
his marriage and all. Like I
Your
say, I
husband,
wasn't.
your husband to be, right?
My husband to be, yeah,
All right.
and I wasn't really involved a whole lot in that because, like I said, we were busy all the time,
Mhm.
either having church or I was working. I had a job at a bank, um, so uh, as it turned out, early days, shortly after I got there, he was single. He was a father to two little girls and a newly adopted little Eskimo boy
Oh,
that he
wow.
adopted. Yeah, and so I helped out when I could. The kids, the girls especially, they would come over to my trailer where I lived. They called me Aunt Karen.
And
So I
Gary,
really, so I got attached to them.
So
But
hold on, I'm
no,
gonna slow you down for 1 second right here because
yeah,
okay, so you obviously met Brother Peyton there in Alaska.
yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
what was he doing there?
What was he doing there? Well, he was there as a missionary. He had gone
Yeah,
there.
okay.
Yeah. He had gone there. He was a missionary in place that there was another young missionary, a guy that had gone as a missionary assistant as well. So,
Okay.
he was the main missionary, but he
Mm,
had these assistants. We
I
were the
see.
two main assistants, and he had some others, elders and ones that
Okay.
were helping him. Um, but what was I starting to say?
So you were saying that you were Aunt Karen, and you met.
Oh, right. And then, like I said, he was going through some stuff. His mother came up, and while his mother was there, she talked to him, and she said, you've got to get on with your life. You need to get married. These kids need a mother. And he said, well, I don't know. There isn't anybody, who would want to marry me with these 3 kids. Certainly wasn't me. I was I was single and enjoying it, and it's like,
You were happy being Aunt Karen.
and I didn't want any kids, I didn't really know how to be a mother, especially at that age. It wasn't something I was thinking I wanted to tackle.
Mhm.
But then his mom says, well, have you thought about Karen? And he says, she wouldn't want to marry me. And so, I mean, it was kind of funny because it was like, I think her being there, she kind of talked him into it. And she was kind of like, did the segue, it's like, talk to me. And, and
Oh yeah, she
she
was
had
doing
him,
some,
she
she was
had
doing
me
some
all
hooking up,
picked out
right?
for him. Right. But I really, like I say, it wasn't, when he first, was kind of friendly, it's like, no, thank you. I remember one time I didn't really mean to hurt his feelings, but it was Valentine's Day. We
Oh,
came
oh
out of the
no, we can't
store.
take another. Arash has told us a heartbreaking Valentine's story. We can't take another one.
Well, they had these candies for on sale, these hearts and stuff, and I bought a bunch of them. And he was coming out of the store behind me. He said, hey, he says, one of those for me. And I turned around and I says, well, sure, you can have one, but don't take anything, don't take it personal or something like that. Because they had these little sayings
You
on
were
it,
mean. You
I
were
know
mean.
I was. And but between me being close to the kids and working with him, I really can't tell you exactly. I can't pinpoint, like when it happened, when we started to think, well, maybe,
Uh-huh.
but I think because we both had a heart and a love for the church and for the work there and for his kids. And I looking back, I know it was a God thing, because God kind of opened my eyes and suggested, well, maybe it's not so bad to get married. It's like, okay.
Wow, you do have a unique story.
But then it's like when we finally decided, yeah, okay, maybe this is God's will. And we talked to, so he's very, very cautious, because neither one of us wanted to do anything that would be stepping outside of God's will or God's plan for our lives.
Sure.
So he talked to the district superintendent there, and he put, he asked him about it and what he thought and everything. He says, I'm gonna place myself under your decisions, whatever you decide, that's what we'll go with. Because you can't go wrong when you're trusting God,
Sure. Absolutely.
trusting God with your lives and trusting the men of God that he has placed in your lives for direction. And so my husband Joey, he felt like God had told him that if he would place himself under submission to his superintendent, that everything would be worked out okay. So we did that. At first, when he flew out there with his wife, he never flew with his wife. So when he flew out with his wife, we knew he was probably telling me I had to leave and go back, with them to Anchorage. And it was his initial plan. That's what he was going to do. But when he got there, he didn't talk about it all that night. They went to bed. And he said that God woke him up in the middle of the night. And he told him to not, I can't remember exactly the words, but, whatever he had blessed, that he was not to interfere with it, that it was God's will, in other words. So,
wow.
So the next morning at breakfast, he told Joey, he said, my plan was to say no and to take Karen back with us. He said, but God told me differently in the night. He said, he says, I give you my blessings, that go ahead, And so I wanted, of course, my pastor back in Maine, who was a district superintendent, I wanted his blessings upon it as well.
Mhm.
Um, and because he had been my pastor for like 17 and a half years, and plus he was the district superintendent there from my home district. So um, he put his blessings on it, and actually we asked him to perform the ceremony, and he did. So we
Did
flew,
he
the
fly
whole
out or did
bunch
you
of
fly
us flew
back
to Maine,
to?
huh?
I'm sorry. Did he fly out to Alaska or did you
No,
fly
no.
back to Maine?
My mom was dying. She had
Mhm.
my father died earlier that year. He died in 91. And
Mhm.
and my mom had, she had just had major surgery. She had cancer, and she was not doing well. She would not be able to come to Alaska. So my husband had a good job at the time. He put a lot of money into plane tickets, and we all went to Maine and got married there in Maine. That was in October. My mom died the following January. So she was able to,
Quite a blessing.
she could rest in peace that her baby girl was taken
Aw.
care of.
Yes, absolutely. That's a big deal to moms, right?
Yep, yep.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, we have yacked enough. Erica, you want to come back on? And
and it seems like I probably skipped over stuff, but
that's okay.
you kind of got the highlights.
Well, that's all right because if we got more time, I'll pluck some more out of you there, right? But
All
I'm
right,
sure our listeners will maybe pick up some things that maybe I missed
all
there.
right.
Erica, do we have any questions in our queue?
Yes, we do. Well, they're both of them are from Sister Regina. Did you do more pulpit ministry in Alaska?
Um, Actually, I wouldn't say pulpit ministry, not in Alaska, because um, we had so many people there. It was kind of funny because I really didn't have to do any pulpit ministry. My husband preached. The other assistant missionary was a male. He preached some, but we had some elders in the Eskimos in the village there. They had some type of uh, Christian background. They had recently, just before my husband went there, they saw the revelation of baptism in Jesus' name. They had flown into Anchorage and were baptized in Jesus' name. And so they were kind of like some of the founding elders of the church there. And they all, I mean, my husband just let them, get up. We'd go to villages and everybody would take a turn. Everybody would get up and everybody would preach. They'd take turns for a while. Church could go on for hours, and they would get up. They would preach a while. I sang with them.
Mhm, mhm.
I taught Bible studies individually, but church services were very different there. We didn't really have a lot of, we'd have our regular Sunday services or whatever with a kind of a regular format, but for the most part, it was just, we would gather together and people would take turns singing and preaching, exhorting on scriptures. And, it was just really a cool time. Um,
Wow,
so, and it wasn't, again, I was so busy. It wasn't something that I was trying to pursue,
mhm.
pulpit ministry. Actually, I didn't, I got back to pulpit ministry after we got married, and we were back in Maine, pastoring in northern Maine. We were there for like 8.5 years. And during that time, I was made co-pastor with my husband. He had gone through a lot of surgeries on his feet. He was not able to be up. And so during that time, I helped a whole lot in doing a lot of the preaching and teaching. We had some MITs that also helped out. But yeah, I did a whole lot of pulpit ministry there. So I mean, it's like, I've had a little bit of everything, and I've been happy to do whatever. It wasn't something, pulpit ministry wasn't something I was seeking, but God put it there anyways. So even now I do some, but not a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and it's something I don't mind doing, and I told God I would not say no. That's why I'm here tonight.
Oh,
if
I
God open
know
if
about
God
that.
opens
Woo! You
if
got to get
God
extra
opens doors,
education.
I walk through them. I don't say no if it's God.
Oh
And
yeah.
he he makes everything. He really rounds you out, and there are so many different different things, different phases of my life, it's always, you always need to be open to whatever God asks you to do, because even though it might not seem like ministry at the time, God is using it to further your ministry. There are experiences that you have to go through, situations that you have to be in that actually stretch you. They form you into who you need to be the type of minister that you need to be. And you couldn't be that without the experiences and the places and the things that he takes you to and brings you through. They're all for a reason and for a purpose.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, I would encourage women that if they are feeling like they're not in the place that they want to be in ministry, go where God is leading them to be, because God knows what they need to become what he wants them to be.
See, you
And
preaching
sometimes,
now.
yeah, but sometimes, you know, we feel like we're ready and God says, no, you're not ready yet. You know, you
Mhm.
need to go through a few things. You need to have you need to be stretched in areas and in places that you've before, you know, you've kind of closed up and, you
Sure.
know, kept people out of, or not open to people or situations. And God knows how to do it. He'll stretch you in areas and in places that you never knew you needed stretching. It's like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
God, I did need that, you know?
Oh, yeah. No, 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 Sister Karen, you don't know that this week our messages have been on the role of a servant. And we've been talking about some of these things and just,
Oh, okay.
again,
I haven't
yeah,
been following them all, no.
you didn't even know. And you
No.
just spoke some really good word
Okay,
there
well,
related to that topic there.
thank
Yeah,
you, Lord.
absolutely. Yeah. Has some different perspective on that. Sure.
So there's another one that says, do you believe a woman can bring to the pulpit anything different from what a man brings?
Well, I don't know about different as far as doctrinally, but definitely different as far as perspective. Because a woman can see things in ways that men don't, because they're not wired the way we are. Sometimes we have perceptions that they don't have. And I think God uses both. I think he uses men and women in ministry, because he made us both different, even though we're both neither male nor female, neither male nor female with him as far as respect their persons. But he did make us uniquely as individuals. And women they seem to have a more, not, they don't have all the nurturing, because a lot of men can be nurturers as well, but they sometimes have insight. They're nurturers. They're sensitive to things that men may not be. So I think they both, men and women, bring valuable things to the pulpit, and that's why I like to see both being used in ministry in a church, because they're not in competition with one another, but they are working together to make the body complete. And you know, just like in a family, you have a mom and a dad, and the kids need both. They need discipline, they need nurturing, they need a little bit of both. And sometimes, you know, even in a family, the roles may be reversed. The mom might be the stronger one, and the dad might be the more caring one, but they're both necessary. So yeah, I would say that definitely women bring something to the ministry and the pulpit that men can be thankful for. It completes them.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Go, Erica. I'm gonna be quiet.
Did
I'm gonna let the audience have the rest of the time. More things are popping up as Karen talks. Go ahead.
did the Eskimo church accept women ministers?
Yeah, absolutely. They the Eskimo tends to be more of a matriarchal society anyways. So yeah, women were very much, I don't remember anything negative being said about women in ministry. They were just, you know, they were accepted. We had some very precious women in the church there that were very strong Christians, and you know, like I said, we didn't do a lot of pulpit ministry, but they were certainly very effective and very necessary to our church as a whole to be what it was. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
That did it. That did it.
Your husband would like me to ask you about pulpit ministry while pastoring in Mars Hills, Maine.
I thought I covered that already, but yeah, I did a lot of pulpit ministry there. And I taught a lot. I preached a lot. I don't know
Karen,
what else he wants me to
that's
say.
okay. Karen, let me interrupt you for a second. Was Mars Hills the place you moved to that you mentioned you were there for 17 years?
No. That
That's a
was in
different place.
southern. That was in more in central southern Maine.
Okay.
Mars Hill is where we went after we were married. When we left Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
we evangelized about 13 months. They ended up taking a church in Aroostook County in Maine, and we pastored there for 8.5 years. And during that time, I did a lot of pulpit ministry there. I had every week I taught a women's Bible study group, and that was a lot of fun. And then on top of that, I did a lot of the preaching there, a lot of the teaching.
Mm-hmm.
It was, like I said, my husband was laid up for about a year with surgeries on his feet, so he couldn't do any of it.
Right.
So I and some of the ministers in training there, we filled in and carried the load. So
Okay.
I don't know if Joey, if there's something else you need to let me know if I'm missing something.
Like, text her, Brother Peyton. Text her. Notice he.
Where's my
Okay.
phone?
Okay, maybe not text her, right?
Was there or were there any challenges in ministering to the Eskimo people?
And can I add to that? What about language? That was what I was curious about the Eskimo people as well. So maybe.
Well, for the most part, the younger people could speak English. The older people spoke in their Yupik language, their native language. The younger people, young, they were being taught both languages in school. But you had the mid group that they only spoke English because when they were young, they weren't allowed to speak their native language in school. So it's kind of sad, but they like between, I don't know the exact ages, my husband knows better, but the mid group age, they could only speak English. The younger ones could speak both English and Yupik, but the older ones, say probably 50, 60 and above, they only spoke Yupik. So with them, we would have to have a translator. But there wasn't really that much of a problem with the language.
Wow.
They sang a lot of choruses and songs in Yupik, which is really cool. We tried to learn them and sing along, but weren't too successful.
So did you pick up any of the language at all?
A little bit. I'm not as much. I don't use it as much anymore, but at the time I used quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't mean to hijack somebody's question here, but
no, that's all right.
Any other barriers that
What was the question? I don't remember what it was anymore.
Were there any challenges in ministering to the Eskimo people?
No, I don't remember any challenges. The only thing that we had a problem with is there's a lot of, they're very susceptible to alcoholism. And so with a lot of them, the challenge was keeping them sober. They would come in and they'd do really good, and then the next thing you know, they would be out again. And so you have to help them, bring them back to church, and so with some of them, especially some of the newer converts, that was a problem. Not with the older converts. They were not like that because they had been delivered, I guess, or overcome or whatever. But that was one of the problems that we had, was the alcoholism was so great.
Why was that? What was that attributed to?
Well, for one thing, I think in their genes, they're easily addicted. Now, they never had it until the white folks brought it in. I think, I don't remember the name of the man who led his, when they was trading furs and stuff, and they first came to the villages, they introduced alcohol, and which was really sad. But
excuse me.
I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, we were talking about barriers, and you said getting them sober was one barrier.
Yeah, getting them sober was one barrier, but I guess she was asking why there was such a problem there.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there was supposedly a dry town, it was outlawed, but you had the bootleggers, they would always bring it in and they would sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of alcoholism, a lot of deaths because of alcohol, and suicide. That was very high especially in the villages, because young people, everybody had a TV. If they had electricity at all, they had a TV. They might not have anything else, but they had a TV.
Mm-hmm.
And they would see what they thought was reality in the outside world, and knowing that they would never be able to have any of it, never be able to attain, because they felt like, they were so limited and not able to become anything or to leave their little village or where they were at. So there was a lot of hopelessness there as a result. And one, I remember especially, I can't remember the village, but in one graduating class of, I think like 23, within a year, like they all except for a couple of them had committed suicide. It was just so sad.
Goodness, that is awful.
Yeah. So suicide, especially among the younger people, is very high because of the hopelessness. So that was one thing that, by us going there, we felt like we were bringing them hope. That they may never leave their village, but they can get a hold of something that goes beyond, and something that they can become a part of, that is bigger than just a little village or the little area that they live in. And getting them connected to God brought them hope that there is an escape, there is something else that we can hold on to, that
and look forward to.
It's
That's
better. Yes, it's a better way.
Wow. Eric, any questions? I have another one. Again, I don't want to take a long time.
Did you find it difficult to adapt to the extremes of darkness and light in Alaska?
I never did. Some people did, especially if they have whatever it is that they need sunlight a lot. If they don't have the sunlight, they get really depressed, or it never bothered me. For one reason, I think, where I worked in my job that I had before I went there, I worked a lot of the graveyard shifts. So I was used to sleeping in the daytime, and getting up at night. So that really didn't bother me. Now, if you try just to go by whether it's light or dark, you can have problems. But if you learn to live by the clock, you're okay. I remember one time, not in Bethel, but after we had left Bethel and moved to Delta Junction, we had a huge garden there. We were out working at it, clearing weeds and doing different things out in the garden. And finally, it's like, isn't it time for supper? What time is it anyway? Because it's so light out. It was 11 o'clock at night. It's like, well, I think probably we ought to call it a day.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah,
which makes it. Well, you said live by the clock. You mentioned that you have all night services, and it probably was pretty challenging though to live by the clock, considering.
Right, and you don't. If you're going to have a church service, you're going to a village, and you're going to have a church service. You don't say come at a certain time, because people just come and go. You could be having church and some people would come. They'd say, well, they'd leave. Somebody else would come. You just have church. You don't set times because they'll show up when they want to show up and they'll leave when they want to leave.
Yes.
So
I know some Newark folk that would love that kind of thing.
So yeah, but a lot of them, they would live like that. They eat when they got hungry, they'd sleep when they got tired. But if you're holding a job of any kind, like I worked at a bank, so you kind of had to go by the clock, You have to get up at a certain time. You have to discipline yourself to go to bed, even though it's still light out. It's discipline for sure. Yeah,
sure. Any other questions, Erica?
Yes. Have you remained in touch with anyone You ministered to in Alaska. And do you have any updates on how the churches in Alaska are doing now?
I think they're doing pretty good. We meet usually when we can, when we have general conference. We meet with the pastor that's there now, and they catch us up on the news and let us know how the church is going. And a lot of the people that we worked with, we had connections with there. We still keep in touch, like through Facebook or whatever. Yeah, they're still,
isn't it?
they are precious people. I mean, I love them, and they still reach out to me, and sometimes they'll comment on pictures that I put on or whatever. So I still feel the connection there. We'd love to go back sometime and visit. Just not sure. It's never worked out up to this point, but it's still on the back burner. Something we'd like to do.
All right.
Do you think because it was dark for half of the year, that brought out a lot of depression and alcoholism?
I really don't know, because I don't know if that would or not, because it's what they're always used to. You know what I'm saying? It's their way of life. So I don't think it would affect them as much as it would affect people like us going in there that weren't used to it. But it may. I just couldn't speak on that behalf, if that would have anything to do with it or not.
Right. So I got to get one more. We're coming up. We're close on time here, Erica. You can hold on if you got another one, but I have to ask this question because I heard that you had a lot to do with, or should I say, with Joey and his education. We all know that Joey has umpteen PhDs and all this stuff, and but I heard that you played a key role in that. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, mainly, just like everything that he's ever since I've been married to him, that is, up until then, of course, I wasn't involved in his education, but all of the degrees he's gotten since then, I'm his editor. I proofread all of his work, and so I kind of get his education secondhand. And so he got 2 masters, and everybody said one was for him and one was for me. So, because I don't have any formal education as far as degrees myself, but I've gotten them by proxy, through him.
Oh yeah, because you always agree. Did you always agree with everything he wrote?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, we would have some discussion sometimes about things. I'd ask him about things, or my viewpoints, and sometimes I'd get him going just for the fun of it, because especially when he was driving, he used to fall asleep a lot when he was driving before he realized he had sleep apnea. So I would pick something I knew he didn't agree with, right? And I'd get in a heated discussion with him, and just to keep him awake. So he wouldn't fall asleep while he was driving. And the kids, they'd be in the back seat, they'd say, "Oh no,"
Here they go, right?
Right. But it was fun. But for the most part though, we pretty much see and view everything, that's one thing I like about it. We view ministry, and he's very, very encouraging. He encourages me to do more than what I want to do, He's very supportive, and we usually see eye to eye in most things, when it comes to, scriptures, when it comes to ministry, when it comes to, the way things are in the world, especially about loving your neighbor, and loving God, loving your neighbor, how important that is. And so yeah.
So you got at least a master's by proxy, at least, right?
Yeah, at least. And I'm working. He's working on his second doctorate now, so I'm working on my second as well. No, I'm working on my first. He's working on his second.
That's all right. Erica, do we have anything else? I don't want to miss somebody's question.
I have one more that I saved for last because.
All right.
Okay. All right. So Sister Regina said that there was a funny story about a date, maybe your first date, that she's remembering.
It was like, I need more information.
Said maybe it was a dream that she had, but she remembers you saying a funny story about a date.
Well, the funny thing was that wasn't really a date though, when I told him not to take it personal about the Valentine's Day. But let me think. Come on, Regina, you got to give me more than that.
Uh-oh, we have to save that one for next time.
I can't think of it. I'm sorry.
That is all right. We'll have to report back on that. She'll get that if he's like me. As soon as we close out, we'll go, oh wait a minute, I know what she was talking about.
Right. Yeah.
I have to bring it back to you.
Excuse me. What, dear?
Secretary's Day.
What funny thing happened?
Are we doing this? I love it.
Secretary's Day. That's what I thought I heard him say.
Yeah. Well, I remember that.
Secretary's Day.
Yeah.
Karen, Secretary's Day.
Karen's like, I need something more.
Regina said it was.
Okay, I guess it was
like
funny because it was our first date, but it wasn't really a date because it was Secretary's Day. So he took me out for Secretary's Day. He kind of tricked me into it, I guess. Like it was really our first date, but he took me out because it was Secretary's Day.
Oh, so he
wasn't a date.
cloaked it in this whole Secretary's Day business.
Yeah, so he took me out to eat for Secretary's Day, and he was really, that was how he was working his way into dating
That
me.
was his guys. I see.
Okay, I guess that was kind of funny the way that worked out.
It's one of those things we had to be there.
She said something about she thought you insulted him or something.
Oh, I was always doing that.
It's like, and that was kind of common, right?
Well, maybe you're talking about when he was standing in piles of laundry like waist high, and he kind of like not really serious, but suggesting that I marry him. It's like, yeah, right.
He's suggesting. So Brother Peyton, when did he just come out? Like, when did he finally just ask, or how did that go down? We'll end on that note.
I don't remember him getting down on one knee or anything and proposing.
So what did he come up one day in church service and say, come up to the altar, let's pray with these people, and then all of a sudden I'm just kidding, since he's working in these covert operations here.
Well, I know at first, I know he asked me several times, he didn't really just say, will you marry me? But, like working around to it. Well, what do you think about, and it's like, nah, I don't think so.
Well, it's a miracle. It's a miracle you guys actually got married.
It is because like I said, I was deciding, I'm a single in ministry, I don't need to be married. It's like, okay.
You were holding on to that. That's funny.
And I tried talking him out of it, and I couldn't talk him out of it. So finally, I said, okay, no.
you twisted my arm. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I'll marry you. Okay, that's funny. You give new meaning to single and happy. Right?
Yeah, but looking back on it now, I mean, I wouldn't change it for anything. I know it's God's will, and absolutely. I know I've thrown a little humor in there, but
hey, God has a sense of humor.
Yeah, He does.
Absolutely. And, well, it was cool. Well, it's been great giggling with you tonight.
Maybe
I'll put it on me. I like to giggle, right? And we definitely appreciate you sharing some of your story. And I'm sure some of our viewers, there's different pieces that resonated with them. And definitely been an encouragement that God can use us, right? Whatever's at hand.
Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm. Whatever your hand finds to do, just do it and let God worry about when and where.
Absolutely. That's a great ending to this tonight.
Yeah.
And to our week, which is unplanned, but we've been talking about the role of a servant, and that is a key point that you brought up there. Yep. So we thank you all for spending this evening with us tonight. Thank you, Sister Karen. Thank you, Brother Peyton from the other room over there.
Actually, he's outside.
He's yelling at
He was afraid if he was in here that I would be too nervous or whatever. And
that's funny.
And he might be too tempted to jump in, and say something. So he did really good. He didn't really jump in till I asked,
That's funny. That's love. All right.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, once again, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to stop over at Newark UPC and newarkupc.info. And there you can share praise reports and prayer requests. You can join a small group or find out when small groups meet. We've had a couple of unique pop-ins on our small groups with people that are not even in this area, which is cool. That just popped in on a Tuesday or Thursday night. And these groups are not open just to church members, but to whosoever will. Right? You want to, there's Bible lessons, there's prayer, there's sharing. They're a great way to get together during this COVID, season that we're in, when people can't connect in person. So everything you need to know about is there. Kids classes. Again, you don't have to be a member of this church. We have Bible youth. I'm trying not to use the word kids Bible night. That's what we call it when we're in service. But our children's services are online also. So anyway, newarkupc.info. That's the place to go. God bless you all, and we will see you. This is Friday, right? We'll see you tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, same place. God bless you all and have a great night.